Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into a really complex topic, looking at sources that connect massive wealth, how it's gained so fast, and, well, the role of charisma and belief in all that.
Definitely tricky territory.
Absolutely. Our mission is straightforward. We want to dissect the mechanisms, how prominent leaders, whether they're using faith or maybe selling secular success, get incredibly rich, incredibly quickly.
And look, this is sensitive. It sits right where faith, power, and ethics collide. Our aim isn't to judge any specific belief, but to just sort of map out the factual patterns we see across history and society today.
Yeah, understand the structure that lets these financial empires get built on essentially donations and trust.
Exactly.
Because you see the headlines, right? Mega church pastors, self-help gurus. Seems like they go from nothing to owning private jets almost overnight. So the core question from our sources is this: why do these powerful figures sometimes get so rich, so fast? And is this really just a religious thing? Okay, let's unpack this.
So starting with the religious angle.
Right, particularly within, say, large parts of evangelical Christianity. The sources highlight this really efficient financial engine. They call it the prosperity gospel.
Yeah, and it's more than just passing the collection plate. It's a whole theological setup.
I said.
It basically reframes the act of donating. Giving money becomes sowing a seed.
Okay.
And the teaching is that sowing this seed is, well, essential if you want to receive God's financial blessing, the harvest.
So it turns charity into a kind of transaction, almost like an investment.
Pretty much a quid pro quo.
Yeah.
Donate this, get that blessing. It gives the leader immense leverage and creates this direct revenue pipeline.
But that's just the theology, the justification maybe. The sources seem to really emphasize the structural parts that allow it to scale up so big.
Oh, absolutely. The structure is key.
Yeah.
You've got major advantages, especially tax and transparency advantages, in places like the U.S.
How does that work?
Well, religious organizations often get significant tax breaks. Exemptions from income tax, property tax, sometimes sales tax, and crucially, they often face way less public scrutiny, fewer audits than secular nonprofits do.
Right, less oversight. And I remember reading in the sources about specific loopholes that amplify the leader's personal wealth, too. Something about housing.
Yeah, the ministerial housing allowance. That's a huge one in the U.S.
Explain that a bit.
It lets pastors claim their housing costs, and we're talking sometimes multi-million-dollar homes, as non-taxable income.
Wow. So their effective wealth, just balloons, tax-free, and kind of under the radar.
Exactly. Compare that to a CEO or even a director of a regular nonprofit. Their whole compensation package is out there, taxed, scrutinized. It's a totally different world.
So you combine that lack of transparency, that opacity, with the reach of modern media.
Televangelism, streaming.
Yeah, soliciting funds globally, that's the recipe for these billion-dollar organizations growing so fast.
And it's fueled by this powerful psychological dynamic. The leader's wealth, the jet, the mansion, isn't presented as personal indulgence.
No, it's proof, right? Proof of God's favor.
Exactly. It becomes a symbol. So instead of making people skeptical, the leader's opulence actually encourages more donations. People think they're investing in the same faith that will bring them that kind of visible blessing.
The examples in the research really drive it home. Modern figures, like Joel Osteen. Huge church. Net worth reportedly around $100 million, lives in this massive mansion. But what was interesting is how his wealth isn't just from tithes. It's also books, ticketed events, IP.
Right, diversification. It further insulates the finances from typical church oversight.
Yeah.
That's a modern twist.
But the underlying pattern isn't new at all.
Not at all. Think back to Oral Roberts in the 80s, raising millions for his prayer tower with these big public faith healing campaigns.
Or globally, you mentioned Nigerian Pentecostal leaders.
Yeah, figures like David Oyedepo, building universities, owning private jets, all largely funded by tithes from congregations where many people have very low incomes.
And if you go way back, the sources point to the Catholic Church selling indulgences.
Oh, the classic example, late Middle Ages. Basically monetizing forgiveness, promising less time in purgatory for cash.
Which massively enriched the church leadership.
And famously helped spark the Protestant Reformation. It shows how long this tension has existed.
And it's not just one tradition. The sources mention issues in other faiths, too, like misusing charitable funds.
Yeah, they mentioned the Abbasid Caliphate, where rulers apparently diverted WAC funds.
Yeah.
Maybe we should explain WAC.
Good idea.
WAC are essentially charitable endowments in Islamic tradition, perpetual trusts meant for community support, public good.
Okay.
But when those funds were used to build lavish palaces instead, It's the same pattern, prioritizing personal luxury over the intended communal benefit.
So the core mechanism seems ancient. Selling something intangible salvation, a blessing, healing for very tangible wealth. But the big question then is this kind of exploitation of hope only found in a spiritual context?
Well, what's fascinating here is, no, not at all. This pattern of using trust and charisma to rapidly accumulate wealth, it's universal. It pops up wherever you have power imbalances, and a charismatic leader selling certainty to people who feel vulnerable or are seeking something.
Right, so it plays out in purely secular settings, too. The sources talk about secular cults or these exploitative groups.
Exactly. They promise success or enlightenment or health, but demand huge fees for seminars, memberships, whatever.
Like NXIVM, Keith Raniere. He built this $100 million plus empire.
Right, not promising heaven, but executive success. High cost, high control seminars.
Or even going back, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh in the 80s promised spiritual liberation.
And ended up with 93 Rolls Royces donated by followers. The promise changes, but the transaction feels very similar.
And the sources put a spotlight on the self-help industry, and MLMs too, multi-level marketing schemes.
Yeah, they often sell hope packaged as a business plan or personal transformation.
Tony Robbins comes up, estimated $500 million net worth from these huge emotionally charged seminars. Critics call it a cult of personality.
He sells a path, a promise of a better life for a significant price.
Then there's Scientology. Operates technically as a religion,
but functions essentially like a massive global business built on auditing fees. Billions overseen by David Miscavige, derived from costly courses in counseling.
So it seems the core similarity, whether it's God's blessing or secular success being promised, is leveraging trust and hope.
You're buying a promise. The leader collects the payment.
But the sources did point out a key difference, right? Something that explains why the wealth seems maybe more dramatic or hidden in the religious sphere.
Yes, and it boils down to accountability and transparency, or the lack thereof.
How so?
Well, public opinion isn't great for exploitation in either area. One study showed over 70% of Americans think prosperity preaching is exploitative.
Okay, so people are skeptical.
Right. But secular organizations, even nonprofits, generally face much stricter legal oversight and public financial scrutiny.
They don't get the same sweeping tax exemptions usually.
Generally, no. And their financial records are often subject to mandatory public disclosure or audits in a way that many religious organizations simply aren't.
So it's that ability to operate with less financial transparency, claiming a religious purpose, while maybe functioning like a huge untaxed business.
That's what makes the religious context uniquely fertile ground for rapid, often hidden, personal wealth accumulation for the leadership.
Okay, that makes sense. But now, let's shift gears a bit. If this is in some ways a business model, why does questioning it, why does dissent seem so dangerous sometimes? People face real threats.
It comes down to protecting power and fundamentally protecting the money.
The revenue stream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sources are really clear on this. Scandals are financially devastating. Expose a leader and you can see donations plummet. Congregations or follower bases might shrink by, say, 20, 30, even 50% almost overnight.
So silencing critics is basically risk management, institutional self-preservation.
You could see it that way, yes. It's about maintaining control and income.
And the tactics used, they seem to span both psychological manipulation and actual physical danger.
Definitely. In religious contexts, critics often get labeled, not just disagreed with, but smeared, called Jezebels or Pharisees or tools of the devil. It's designed to discredit them within the community, isolate them, make others afraid to even listen. Shunning is powerful.
And beyond the name-calling, it gets serious. Legal threats.
Oh yeah. Prosperity preachers like Kenneth Copeland have used teams of lawyers to sue critics for defamation. It can bankrupt individuals just trying to raise concerns.
And internationally, the stakes can be lethally high. The sources brought up some stark examples.
They did. The fatwa against Salman Rushdie in 1989 for his novel. That's an extreme case of reacting to perceived blasphemy with a death sentence.
Or, more recently, the murder of the journalist Gauri Lankesh in India in 2017.
Right. She was actively investigating and exposing scams run by some Hindu gurus, a direct silencing.
Even in groups that aren't traditionally religious, like Jonestown.
They reportedly had hit squads to deal with defectors or journalists who threaten Jim Jones's absolute control. It's about protecting the leader's power and the group's secrets, often financial ones.
And this isn't new either. History's full of it. Galileo.
Facing house arrest in the 16th century just for using science to challenge the church's view of the cosmos. Dissent wasn't tolerated.
So for whistleblowers, it's this devastating double hit.
Exactly. They face potential legal trouble, maybe even physical danger, and they lose their community, their social network, often their entire identity, which is so wrapped up in these groups.
Total ostracization.
Profound isolation. It takes immense courage to speak out.
Which brings us to maybe the most profound contradiction here. This raises an important question. If these actions happen to the greed, the hoarding of wealth, the threats against critics, are so obviously counter to basic ethical conduct, what do the actual belief systems these leaders claim to represent say about wealth and greed?
Right. And what's striking is the near universal condemnation of this kind of behavior across almost all major traditions, religious and secular. The irony is just immense.
Hey, Christianity, Jesus' teaching seems pretty direct, Matthew 19.24.
It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. It's hard to misinterpret that.
It directly clashes with the core promise of the prosperity gospel, doesn't it?
Fundamentally. Then look at Islam. You have the pillar of zakat.
Which is?
It's not just suggested charity. It's a mandated religious obligation to distribute a portion of one's wealth to those in need. The Quran explicitly condemns hoarding wealth.
So, massive personal accumulation without distribution goes against a core tenet.
Directly.
Yeah.
And in Judaism, there's tzedakah, charity, yes, but rooted in the idea of justice and righteousness.
Not just optional giving.
No, and the sources emphasize the strong commands, like in Deuteronomy, to actively care for and protect the poor. Hoarding wealth while others suffer is seen as unjust.
What about Eastern traditions?
Buddhism, for example, heavily emphasizes non-attachment. Aparigraha, greed, is literally named one of the three poisons, along with hatred and delusion that cause suffering and keep people from enlightenment.
So the relentless pursuit of massive wealth is basically the opposite of the stated goal.
Pretty much. And even if you step outside religion, secular ethics universally condemn exploitation. Think about Kant treating people as ends in themselves, not means to an end. Or utilitarianism maximizing the overall good, not just personal gain at others' expense.
So the source material really suggests the issue isn't the specific faith or philosophy itself.
No, not inherently. The problem seems to recur wherever you get this toxic mix. Human weaknesses like greed, combined with unchecked charisma, and critically, that structural lack of financial transparency and accountability.
The leader starts serving the organization's bottom line or their own lifestyle.
Instead of the ethical principles they claim to uphold, they shift from being a guide to being essentially a CEO focused on revenue.
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together. To recap our deep dive, this phenomenon, this rapid wealth accumulation by certain leaders, seems fueled by a perfect storm. You've got specific theologies like the prosperity gospel, providing the justification.
Right, the why.
Then you have structural factors, especially the lack of financial transparency and unique tax breaks, providing the how, the cover,
The enabling environment.
and driving it all are these universal human elements. Greed, yes, but also our deep-seated need for hope, for certainty, which charismatic figures exploit.
And the key takeaway from all this, especially for you listening, whether you're a donor, a follower, a participant, is that safeguards are absolutely vital.
What kind of safeguards?
Things like demanding mandatory public audits for any organization, religious or secular, that solicits significant public funds, pushing for much greater financial transparency, and just more critical awareness, more vigilance from donors themselves, asking questions.
Right, accountability needs to be built in or demanded.
Absolutely.
Which leaves us with a final thought. Something for you to chew on as you navigate these complex issues. Whether you're putting money in a collection plate, buying that seminar ticket, maybe even funding a political movement based on a leader's appeal. The fundamental question to ask yourself might be this: is the prosperity you see in the leader genuinely serving the larger mission you believe in? Or has that prosperity itself become the real mission, the thing you're actually funding? So what does this all mean for you?
A crucial question.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.